Arratsaldeon denoi, muy buenas tardes a todos los que nos hemos dado cita hoy en el Aquarium de San Sebastián para compartir nuestra pasión por el mar. Probablemente cada uno de nosotros, y ya lo han dicho antes, cada uno de nosotros sienta la pasión por el mar de una manera diferente. Hay quien le gustará dar un paseo por la orilla. Hay quien se relaja contemplando el mar, hay incluso quien canta o escribe al mar, pero en general no cabe duda de que el mar sigue siendo un gran desconocido que nos guarda muchos secretos y muchas sorpresas. Los investigadores del mar tratamos de desvelar algunos de estos secretos, pero el mar solo desvela los secretos a los investigadores más apasionados, porque hay que ser realmente un apasionado del mar para poder conocerlo, contarlo y compartirlo. Y hoy tenemos la gran suerte de contar con la presencia de dos grandes apasionados del mar, dos investigadores, biólogos marinos, que llevan toda su vida desvelando estos secretos y hoy vienen a compartir su conocimiento con nosotros. Trabajan con atunes, principalmente con el atún rojo o cimarrón. El atún rojo se ha convertido en un icono de la sostenibilidad del mar, debido a que en los últimos años se ha pescado tanto que ha sido necesario elaborar y adoptar un plan de recuperación para la especie. Los atunes viven en alta mar, lejos de la costa, y por eso resulta difícil verlos, tocarlos, estudiarlos y conocerlos. Para poder conocer y disfrutar de los atunes, qué mejor que un acuario con atunes nadando a la vista de cualquier visitante. Ojalá que pronto podamos ver algunos atunes en este Aquarium de Donostia. Por otro lado, si cada vez somos capaces de pescar menos atunes, ¿podremos seguir comiendo atún en el futuro? ¿Es posible producir atunes en granjas de piscicultura? Los dos expertos de hoy nos hablarán de las grandiosidades del atún rojo y de los retos que supone mantenerlos en tanques, reproducirlos, domesticarlos. Sin más preámbulos, me gustaría dar la palabra a nuestro primer conferenciante, el doctor Charles Farwell, Chuck para los amigos, que esta mañana ha hecho un comentario que me ha parecido un ejemplo de pasión por el conocimiento y pasión por el mar. Él comentaba que hace algunos años, cuando se plantearon meter atunes en tanques y mantenerlos en cautividad, la gente decía que eso era básicamente imposible. Les llevó un poquito de tiempo, se pusieron manos a la obra y hoy en día esa misión imposible es una realidad. Han conseguido meter y mantener atunes en cautividad que utilizan tanto para la investigación como para el deleite del público que visita su acuarium en Monterey. El suyo es uno de los pocos acuarios en el mundo donde se pueden ver atunes. Charles nos hablará del atún rojo, una especie emblemática. Su charla se titula Bluefin Tuna, The Most Advanced Fish Species in the Ocean, Masters of Power, Speed and Endurance. Charles, por favor.
First, I would like to thank the organizers for the passion of knowledge, and to the San Sebastian Aquarium for this invitation. I am very honored to be here. And San Sebastian, without question, is one of my most favorite places to visit anywhere. And to be invited to come back, it took about 1/2 of 1 second to say, yes, fantastic. So without going it much further about how glad I am to be here, I would like to start with my talk. And first, I have an evening twilight photograph of Monterey Bay Aquarium, where I have been employed for the last 27 years. I have to say the best 27 years of my life. It's the most fantastic institution, and it has given me the opportunity to try to do the impossible, which is collect and keep tuna in captivity. So without going any further about all of that, my title, as Alex mentioned, bluefin tuna, one of the most advanced species in the ocean, and I would like to go through and explain to you why I think this is true. First off, a photograph of our Outer Bay Waters exhibit, which was built expressly to keep tuna, though the tank size and shape were designed for tuna, and the life support system, the system that supplies the water, the life to the fish, was designed specifically to meet the biological requirements of the tuna that we hope to keep in this tank. Now, bluefin tuna are extremely novel and very unique. And first off, I would like to point out how streamlined and beautiful this fish is. Several of the features that you'll notice that if you look just here, you might detect a small indentation in the body of the tuna. This is where this fin will fold into when it's traveling at very high rates of speed. The dorsal fin, first dorsal fin, folds into a notch at the very top of the body. Both of these features allow the fins to be retracted to reduce friction as the fish goes through the water, which means it can save energy by being more streamlined. The shape of the fish is very streamlined. And the tail, this very large semilunate tail, is something that is known as a high aspect ratio. It functions extremely efficiently at high frequency when the tail is beating very quickly, produces a tremendous amount of power, and does so with a minimum amount of drag. Now, one feature that maybe people don't understand or think about on tuna is that they are deep divers. I'm sorry, I just very fast forwarded there instead of the laser. They are very deep divers, water 200, 500, sometimes to 1,000 meters in depth, whereas very dark, not a lot of light. Well, they have a well-developed eye that is very sensitive to low light levels, and that sensitivity is maintained through special adaptations, which I will mention in a few minutes. The other feature about tuna is that they are known as ram ventilators. They swim with their mouth open, and as they move forward, water is forced into the mouth, passes through over the gills, and out through this gill slit that's on either side of the body. And the harder the fish swim, the more oxygen they need, the wider that gap will become. So they have adapted to living a very highly pelagic, open ocean, in a very open ocean pelagic environment where they never stop swimming. They're constantly swimming in motion. And some people would say that tuna never sleep, although watching them in captivity at night, they change their behavior. They go into a different type of behavior during the late evening, early morning hours. So I will try to advance this correctly this time. So I've covered body shape, low coefficient of drag. They go through the water with very minimal effort. The tail fin, high aspect ratio, produces a lot of power. Ram ventilation, which is very important to the species for obtaining their oxygen. Now, before I go much further about tuna, just a few words about fish in general. And there are 4 basic characteristics in swimming behavior. The first one that we look at on the far left is an eel shape. And when the eels swim, the head and the tail are moving back and forth in great undulations. There's a lot of energy that is spent in body motion. And as we move into the next group of fish, which contains bass, salmon, other similar fish, their head still moves from side to side, but not as much as an eel, and the tail body is moving in the opposite direction. Again, still wasted energy for motion. And as we go into the carangids, the jacks, we see that the body is beginning to get stiff. The head and body do not move as much as we saw in this group of fish, and the tail moving back and forth. Again, doggone it. Okay, I'll try to control that. When the last group of fish, the tuna, forms, the body is much wider, it's very stiff, and as it is swimming, the head remains almost motionless. The only part of the body that is moving is the tail as it moves from side to side. And we'll see this in greater detail in this next drawing. This is showing a bluefin tuna or a tuna during one actual cycle of the tail beat. Here it's shown at the far right, and as it is moving towards the left and then coming back to the right, you see the tail motion described here in this line. But if you look at the head in all of these figures, which is shown at the far left, the head barely moves at all. And what this means is that there is almost no wasted energy from the forward motion, from the locomotion that is being derived from the tail as it is beating back and forth from right to left. And this is a technique that allows the fish to travel great distances without using a lot of energy. The next video is a little bit of a animation. Excuse me for my... And this is going to demonstrate the role of the fins and how they divert the turbulence of the water as it passes over the fish's body. The water turbulence is transferred up to the fins, so it's diverted away from the body to reduce drag. And again, we see the fins folding into the grooves and then coming back out, which helps in eliminating drag. Then, at this point, the animation is showing that the internal temperature of tuna is elevated, and we'll talk about that in just a few moments. So here we have a very streamlined fish that is capable of traveling thousands of miles in its lifetime, and it does this through maintaining a very streamlined, efficient body to travel through a very viscous liquid, water. Now, one question. Are there any tuna fishermen with us this evening? I hope so. It is probably one of the most fun, enjoyable fish to catch as a sport fisherman. And one thing that I noticed early on when I was fishing for tuna for sport is that if you caught a fish and were cleaning it, soon after you caught it, the inside temperature of the fish was very warm. And this is very unusual. Most fish, when you catch them and clean them, their body temperature is the same temperature as the water that you're catching them in. But tuna, no. Their body temperature is greatly elevated. It can be as much as 10 degrees higher than the water temperature that they're swimming in. And that term is known as endothermic, meaning the inside temperature is high, as opposed to, say, a salmonid or a sea bass, which is ectothermic. The inside body temperature is the same as the outside. Two fancy terms that I only offer because they're there. But the main thing to remember is tuna are much warmer than the environment that they live in, that they swim in. Now, how do they do this? Well, I want to go over how the heat is generated and what are the benefits. This is a photograph of two yellowfin tuna that are just come out of the water. If you look down here at the bottom left-hand corner, you can see spray. The fish have just busted through the surface. They're chasing prey. This fish has a fish in its mouth, a flying fish. It was successful in catching a fish as it came up to the surface. its speed and power was so great, they just came right out of the water. And you can see that the fish on the top is even much higher, maybe 1.5, 2 meters out of the water. And this is probably about a 45-kilogram tuna. That's a lot of weight to be that high out of the water. Now, I'm leading up to how do they generate heat? And one of it is through physical activity, the actual muscle contractions that drive these fish through the water is creating heat. The same as if we're exercising very hard, we feel our temperature starting to increase. The same thing takes place in tuna. The second source of heat is going to be through digestion. This meal that this fish just caught, as it is digested, the digestive processes will liberate heat from the stored chemicals that are in the body of the prey. This is a little bit of a scientific photograph. I apologize if it's hard to follow. The first image on the left is a steak from a bluefin tuna. So you can see the perfectly round. Oh, this is not good. The shape of the fish. Here is the peritoneal cavity, part of the intestinal tract shown here. The part that I want to draw attention to is this part of very dark muscle. This is known as the red muscle. And it has several very important functions. One, it is able to contract contract rhythmically and propel the fish forward for endless periods of time without the fish becoming exhausted. The red color is because of a high content of myoglobin, the type of chemical that is responsible for absorbing and transporting oxygen, and it has a high blood flow to it. So this tissue can contract continuously 24 hours a day without the fish getting tired. Now, the muscle that is around that, even though it is not white, is referred to as white muscle. And in bluefin tuna, there is a high number of capillaries that are supplying blood to this tissue. But this muscle tissue is only used during rapid periods of acceleration, when it's trying to catch a food item or perhaps escape a large predator, such as a shark. They will use that for rapid acceleration, high speed. Now, the second function of this red muscle is that it contains a structure that looks like this, only this is a drawing, and it's known as a heat exchanger organ. And what is taking place in this structure is the warm blood from the muscle is flowing through in one direction, and the cold blood that is coming back to the internal organs from the gills and the heart go in one direction, the warm blood in the opposite direction, and as they pass each other, heat is transferred from the warm blood to the cold blood. And in this manner, the temperature inside the fish is maintained at an elevated number of degrees. So this is a very important aspect, and it has reached its highest advanced state in bluefin tuna. And it gives bluefin tuna the advantage to make very deep dives into very cold water, as deep as 1,000 meters in water temperature that is cold as 1 and 2 degrees centigrade, which is very cold. And during that entire dive, the body temperature of the fish is still elevated, so it's able to function. Now, we've gone over the sources of heat, which is digestion and muscle contraction, and that the heater organ is functioning as a heat conservation structure. Now, what are some of the advantages of maintaining a high temperature? One advantage is it makes the muscles of the fish operate much more efficiently. And before I go into that, the photograph here is an infrared photograph of a bluefin tuna steak, a fish that had just been sacrificed. The steak was put on a photographic table, and a photograph taken with an infrared camera. The inside core temperature is very hot, maybe 5 or 6 degrees above the water temperature that it was taken at. And as we go from the center out towards the surface of the fish, the temperature starts cooling off until you get to the skin, where it is about the same temperature as the water that it was in. Now, if we were to take a small sample of muscle tissue from here, only one muscle fiber, and put it on a special apparatus where we could excite the muscle tissue so it would contract, we can measure the force of contraction. And this graph is showing power at 4 different temperatures. And as we increase the temperature, we see that the power being measured in watts per kilogram increases dramatically, going from about 4 up to 14 with a 10-degree rise in temperature. And the other thing that's very interesting about this work that we did at the Tuna Research Center in Monterey is that the apparatus was able to shock the muscle tissue at some frequency. And as the temperature increased, we were able to excite the muscle temperature much more frequently, which meant the tail could beat much faster as the body temperature increased. So having a warm body gives more power to the fish and the ability to swim with greater stroke frequency, so the fish can go faster. And this means that the fish is able to travel very long distances over extended periods of time without using a lot of energy to do so. Other advantages: digestion rate is much faster at warmer temperatures. The food that the fish is eating will be digested much more rapidly, which means it can eat more food, grow quicker, put more energy into egg production, and be able to propagate itself at a much higher rate than if it were a cold-bodied fish. The nervous system, we talked about the eye being very large. The central nervous system is operating at a much higher level of efficiency. The eye, because it is warm, is able to detect very small amounts of light in deep water. And this is very useful for the fish if it's going to be catching food while it's making deep foraging dives. Now, I mentioned that these fish are able to make long voyages. This is a track of one bluefin tuna that we put a tag in just about here off the coast of Baja California, Mexico. It spent about 3 months along the coast of California before starting back towards Japan. And it spent about a month in these 2 areas making deep dives, feeding. And these are 2 different seamounts, or deep mountain ridges that are coming up from the bottom of the ocean. And they're very rich in food. And our tagging work has shown that fish repeatedly will stop there and spend some time feeding before they go on the rest of the way into the coastal areas of Japan. And the entire crossing, if you subtract all these small periods of time here, it only takes the fish about 3 months to travel about 10,000 kilometers. So it's traveling 24 hours a day in this movement. And you have to remember that the fish was born over here, and it's already come across the Pacific one time before. So in doing this trip, it's making its second trip across the Pacific Ocean, a very long voyage. We're showing the track of the fish, and we determine this by using tags that we refer to as smart tags or electronic tags. And one of the key parts of these tags is this long stalk that has a light-sensitive element at the tip. And as much as one small unit of light strikes this, it will excite some fluorescent material that's inside the stalk, and that energy will be transferred down into a small computer chip that is in the tag. So we're able to measure light at very low levels, and the tags are compensated for depth. The tags also have pressure sensors, and as well as the light sensor and temperature sensors for water temperature and body temperature. So we're able to measure a number of features when we put these tags on a tuna. How does the light measurement work? Well, we're all familiar with the idea of using a sextant to measure the absolute azimuth of the sun at high noon and record the time of high noon and then compare it to a clock set to Greenwich Mean Time, 0 degrees longitude. Well, these tags are doing that. They have been programmed with a clock that tells the tag what time it is. Oops, excuse me. And by measuring sunrise, the full day of sunlight, and then sunset, we're able to compute local noon, where the fish is, and then we can compare that position against time and come up with a line of longitude, shown here in this black line, at 55 degrees west longitude. Now, how do we get latitude? And one way is that the tag is recording temperature. And what we can do is record the temperature when the fish is at the surface, which is this piece of data right here, and by combining the temperature of the water when it's at the surface and comparing that to a satellite image that was taken on the same day showing sea surface temperature, and it's an infrared photograph of the ocean surface, we can come up with a relatively close approximation of where that fish is. So this is how we do this. Now, a lot of the activity that we're doing occurs on board a research vessel, a fishing vessel, and I would like to just go through those very quickly. We catch all of our specimens by rod and reel, and this is very fortunate for us because we love catching fish using sport technique. And in this case, we're doing it for science. The fish that are caught are brought up to the stern of the boat. We have a special platform on the back of the boat that's right at water level, and we take this blue sling stretcher and we put it into the water, and we coax the fish into the stretcher that is filled with water, and we get it up to where we can take the hook out of the mouth of the fish. We use a special type of hook known as a circle hook, and the barb has been bent down so the hook is easy to remove from the mouth of the fish. And then we take the fish up to a surgery station after the fish has been brought up to the deck of the boat, and we put a tag in surgically, make an incision, and then do the suturing, and then the fish is released back into the ocean. This entire process, from taking the fish out of the water, putting the tag in, and releasing it, is about 1 minute. We have done enough now where we can actually do it fairly quickly. In the Pacific, we have done about 600 Pacific bluefin tuna, and in the Atlantic Ocean, we've done almost 1,600 fish. So our skill level has increased very slowly over the last 15 years to the point where we have done captive studies on longevity after tagging, and then we have put special tags on the fish in the wild that enable us to track the fish for the first 24 to 48 hours to make sure that our techniques are not harmful to the fish. Now, I'm coming back to this graph that we just saw earlier of this figure talking about the deployment. And this is how we measure this travel in this fish, by the use of these tags. One of the types of data that we are able to obtain, because the tag has a pressure sensor, we get daily diving activity. And these white lines are recording depth. On this side, we have depth in meters. On this side, we have temperature. and then we have time, about 1 year of time in this fish. And these are the data from that fish that we just saw the track for just a moment ago. The red line is body temperature of the fish, and you can see it changes in relationship to making a deep dive, and the water temperature as the fish dives into deep water, say 500 meters, we see the body temperature dropping and the water temperature dropping also. But in all cases, the body temperature is higher than the water temperature. Again, the effects of endothermy. Now, one thing that I'd like to point out is that in this central area right here, this is the time period when this particular fish was at the seamounts, the Emperor's Seamount and Shotsky Rise. And I would like to share a 2-day piece of data that I found extremely fascinating. Again, we have body temperature here, only we're expressing it as excess temperature, temperature in centigrade above its normal temperature. Here we have depth, the diving track, and here we have the units for the dive. And we started here at noon and going through noon a day later, 2 days later. Now, if we look at body temperature, right here, the fish is making a dive. Excess temperature is decreasing a little bit. But something very strange happens here. The excess body temperature drops down below its normal for a very brief period of time, and then it comes up radically, almost to 6 degrees above normal, then slowly, over a period of a day, comes back down to its average temperature, and then we see it slowly building up, and then another deep dive, darn it, there we go, another deep dive shown here where another foraging event occurs. What we think is that this tuna is making deep dives and feeding on some prey item, maybe a squid, that is very cold. It's at the same temperature as the water that it's living in, whereas the tuna is much warmer. So what is happening, it's the same idea if we perhaps take a very large mouthful of ice cream and swallow it, and all of a sudden it's like, oh, that was really cold. This is happening inside the tuna. It has eaten a very cold prey, a squid perhaps. The body temperature takes a very sudden, small decrease in temperature, and then it increases. And this increase in temperature is the effect of metabolism. The food is being digested. There are enzymes that are taking that prey item apart and breaking it into its essential elements. And as the chemical bonds are broken, you start tearing carbons and proteins apart. Heat is generated, is liberated. And it's that heat that we're measuring. And indeed, this is the same heat that is helping maintain the elevated body temperature of the tuna. So we felt, wow, this is really cool. Our tags are telling us when the fish eat. So now in our laboratory situation, we're putting tags in tuna and we're feeding them known amounts of food. And we know how much food the tuna ate, and we can measure its increase in temperature. So now we're getting a fingerprint, a profile of how much heat is associated with how much food, with so many calories. So we hope to be able to look at the nutrition of a wild tuna by looking at these data and comparing them with laboratory data. Our tags also tell us how much time the fish spend in percent time at different temperatures, shown here. And we see, at different depths, both at nighttime and during the daytime. And we also see temperature preferences, daytime and nighttime. And on the bluefin tuna, we see that they prefer temperatures between 17 and 21 degrees, average about 19 degrees centigrade. And if you want to keep bluefin tuna in captivity, this type of information could be very key, very essential to how you maintain your holding tanks for research or for display. Now, in our Tuna Research Center, we maintain several tanks with tuna, both bluefin tuna, we have some yellowfin tuna. Next year, I hope to have some albacore tuna in one tank, only dedicated to that species. But what I want to show you is a short video clip of a feeding event in one of our tuna tanks. Now, these fish were up in the rafters with a large bucket of food. This is squid, and we're putting it in. And you can see the fish are very active. They get very excited when they're fed, and this excitement creates heat. Now we'll throw in some sardines, and bluefin tuna love sardines. Their activity level is even much more so than on squid. So we are able to do this, and then subsequent to a feeding, I know how many fish are in the exhibit, because I have measured them and tagged each one. I know the lengths, so I can calculate their mass. So I know the entire mass, weight of fish in that exhibit. And we have some technology that is part of the life support system that measures the oxygen level going into the tank and the oxygen level in the water that is leaving the tank. By knowing those two pieces of data and the flow rate, the amount of water coming into the tank, I can calculate the amount of oxygen that the fish are using during a course of a day, or in this case, 12 days. And right here, there's a feeding event takes place here. We see oxygen consumption going way up, then slowly falling off. The fish get fed the next day, and it repeats. And it does this over a period of time. The amount of oxygen used depends on how much food we feed the tank. Now, this measurement is very imprecise. We're feeding a large tank. It's open to the atmosphere. We're throwing food in. The fish are moving around wildly. And to make more accurate measurements, we invested in a piece of equipment known as a respirometer. It's basically an aquatic treadmill. It is a closed system. There's one chamber that you can put a fish inside, such as shown here in this diagram. Sorry again. There is a motor that drives a propeller here. The propeller creates a water current that flows circular around through this chamber, and the fish swims into that current. It doesn't go anyplace. It's locked in this chamber, but it is provided a current to swim into. Now, I have, hopefully I can make this work. Sorry. This is a fish inside the respirometer. The black lines are to help the fish orient to being inside this small box. And we have kept fish inside this respirometer for up to 6 days, gathering information on its respiration rate. We can make the motor go faster, so the fish has to swim faster. We have the chamber attached to a large reservoir, so we change the water in this chamber once every 10 minutes. So the water is refreshed, the oxygen level brought back up to 100% saturation, and we repeat the cycle every 10 minutes, making measurements. And we, as I mentioned, we'll do this for several days. We can change the temperature of the water. We have changed it from 2 degrees as high as 25 degrees. So we can challenge the fish at different environmental conditions and different swimming speeds. So this is proven to be a very invaluable piece of equipment. Its only downside is that it has to have people watching it 24 hours a day. And if you do this for more than one day, you learn who your friends are, because you need help doing it. Now, just very quickly, and I apologize for so many graphs, but on this axis, we have oxygen consumption in units of mass. We weigh the fish, we know how much it weighs, so we measure the oxygen, and we divide it by its mass. So we come up with oxygen per kilogram of fish weight. And here is time in days. And this dark blue line is actually the oxygen consumption of a tuna that is fasting. It had no food. It was put into the respirometer for 2.5 days to get this measurement. Then we took that same fish, put it back in its holding tank, gave it a rest period of about 1 week. We came back and we fed that fish a known amount of food. Then we caught it, put it back in the respirometer, and the light blue data is showing the respiration rate of a fish that has just eaten a very large meal. And you can see that this curve takes about 1.25 days to return back to the normal value. Now, this excess oxygen that's being consumed is directly related to the meal size. We have done this many, many times with different meals, and each time this curve will show a difference in amount corresponding to the amount of food that the tuna was fed. Now, this particular fish had a temperature tag surgically implanted into its stomach, into its body cavity. The bottom line is the temperature of the fasted fish during this run. The top light green line is the excess temperature associated with this meal, and you can see it extends out to about this point in time. So our equipment is enabling us to learn much more about the physiology, about how bluefin tuna act in the wild. And this is new information that until the last 2 or 3 years did not exist to scientists. So we have been trying very hard to not only do these experiments, but then to get them written up and published so we can share it with other people in the field. This is a heart rate tag, something very new. And this tag was put into a bluefin tuna, and this is the receptor end. This is sensitive to weak electromagnetic fields that are generated by a beating heart. And when this tag is inserted, we're able to, my thumb is too big. These open circles are the heart rate. And so we're measuring the heart rate of this tuna. And here is the moment of feeding, and we can see once the fish is fed, the heart rate picks up and goes through up until it falls off at about 1 and 1.25 days. And we also see this dark black line is the body temperature, and we see the body temperature going up along in association with the heart rate. Now this makes perfect sense. If you have an animal that is using more oxygen, obviously its heart is going to have to work much harder to supply the oxygen to the digestive system to allow this fish to digest its meal. And we also see that if you put the same heart rate tag in different fish swimming at different speeds, we see as the speed increases, we see that the oxygen rate increases, which makes sense. Fish is working harder. Then, if we look at the heart rate in tunas at different temperatures, is something that is very interesting. The blue diamonds are yellowfin tuna, and they approximate that of bluefin tuna in the higher temperatures. Yellowfin tuna are a semi-tropical fish, so they're very happy at 25, maybe 27 degrees centigrade. Bluefin tuna are okay at that temperature too, but as we start dropping the temperature, we notice that the heart rate of the bluefin tuna continues down to about 2 degrees. And what this means to the tuna is that it is able to make very deep dives, but it is also able to travel north from its normal home range into very cold water, where it can expand its environment, its niche, where it's going to be searching for food. So physiologically, the bluefin tuna is very adapted to surviving in a variety of environments. And we see the same thing in heart output. The bluefin tuna heart is able to produce much more blood flow at different temperatures, whereas the yellowfin just stops functioning at about 12 degrees, and if you're not careful, the fish will die. Whereas bluefin, they keep going. They are very strong, very powerful fish. And the effect of temperature on oxygen consumption, this is something that was totally puzzling to all of us. As we increased the temperature, we expected oxygen consumption to increase. But as we decreased the temperature, oxygen consumption went up. And what it came to us is that the animal is struggling to maintain endothermy, to maintain its body temperature. So it's mobilizing stored energy sources, food that is stored in body tissues in the liver, for digestion to produce heat. And this is taking oxygen. And we see the same thing with swimming speed. For a tuna to swim at a swim speed less than a body length per second, the fish struggles. It's very hard for it to swim slow. They're not built for swimming slow. They're a high-speed animal. So you stress them by swimming them slow, it causes them to utilize more oxygen. That is going to be the end of that presentation, and what I would like to do is very quickly go to a video that I have that will only last about 2 minutes. See if I can do this. Oh, this is much better. Oh, I'm sorry for the sound. How do we turn the sound on? Okay. This is a person up on top of the bait box on the Shogun, our fishing vessel, and he's throwing chum into the water to attract bluefin tuna up to the back of the boat. And these are a group of the people fishing, and this fellow has just caught a bluefin tuna, but he doesn't have it for very long. And you see, anyway, but now we're going down on the swim step. We have a fish that's coming in, and we will be transferring that fish into the people that are on the swim step to transfer the fish up to the surgery station. And here we have the tuna. It's on rod and reel. It's being fought and very carefully brought to the stern of the boat. Here it's caught in the blue sling with water, removing the hook, and then lifting the fish up to the deck of the boat, where we take it to the surgery station. And the fish is very carefully removed from the sling. We cover the eye with a soft pad and very quickly get a water hose into the mouth of the fish so we can ram ventilate the fish while it's laying here in the surgery pad. Here we're tagging the fish. We're turning the fish over for surgery. I think that you see the water hose here, water coming out of the gill. Here, this is the respiration. The fish is being given oxygen during the surgery. This is the archival tag being implanted into the peritoneal cavity. Surgery, fish's suture is being done. Then we will take the fish after the suture is cut off. And we try to launch the fish fairly carefully over the side so it enters the water head first and swims off. That is our tagging operation, and I want to thank you very much for your attention, and I think we have questions later. Oh, thank you.